Hello and welcome to Pathways, where you are invited to join me for a visit with leaders in personal development and cultural evolution. This is your host, Paul O'Brien. While the English language frequently refers to what our bodies know, as in terms of gut feelings, our hearts reaching out to someone, many of us have learned to ignore, deny, or even mistrust our body's messages and wisdom. Even worse, a lot of people don't like their bodies much at all. The result is that when trauma strikes, a time when we need every aspect of our being to master a challenge, we can find ourselves disconnected from our greatest strengths. Our guest today is Suzanne Scurlock-Durana, author of the new book, Reclaiming Your Body, Healing from Trauma and Awakening to Your Body's Wisdom. Her Healing from the Core curriculum, combined with CranioSacral therapy and other bodywork modalities, creates a complete body-centered guide to awareness, healing, and joy. Suzanne teaches around the world and lives in Reston, Virginia. Hello, Suzanne, and welcome to Pathways.
Hello, Paul. Happy to be here.
What an interesting book. And in this book, you write that the body has its own language that's older and more primal than most of us realize. Why don't we start out with a general question about how our bodies communicate with us?
Well, I would like to say that one of the things that I began to notice in doing craniosacral therapy and in being present with people in the healing process is that oftentimes the body had a message to get through to the person's head about some direction they needed to go in for healing or something they needed to stop because it was not doing good for them, and they didn't understand what their body was saying. And as I work, and craniosacral therapy is a lot about really listening and translating the body's signals to the person on the table. And as I was doing that work, and it's been over 30 years of doing that, I began to realize that there were, in every cell of the body, that there was wisdom that was trying to communicate with us all the time, and that there were areas like neighborhoods of wisdom where the characteristic of the wisdom had a particular quality to it that would be different from another area of the body. Like the heart's wisdom is different than the pelvis. And I would say that the bones have a very different quality of wisdom than the gut. So it's a really interesting piece how all of this information started to filter into my awareness as I was working and teaching. And so it became really interesting for me to start to put it together, to bring it to you and to bring it to the world.
Okay, and how long have you been engaged in this kind of research and healing work?
Well, I've been teaching craniosacral therapy for over 30 years now. I've been practicing it for 34 years. I have been in the process of developing the whole Healing from the Core curriculum for about 25 of those 30 years. And just been absolutely, my creative edge is in looking at and understanding how to help people really hear and understand the body's wisdom. And there is a huge amount of wisdom in the body itself that most of us are locked out of in many different ways.
Can you describe craniosacral therapy and the mechanism whereby it helps the body communicate?
Well, craniosacral therapy was originally an osteopathic technique that was put together and synthesized then out of the osteopathic technique by Dr. John Upledger. It's a very light touch, hands-on technique. It's done clothing on. It's not like a massage. Oftentimes you might sit holding one particular area of the body for quite a while, in a sense, listening to it, listening for movement, lack of movement. And in the end, what we're doing there is we are mobilizing and balancing places that are stuck or restricted in the environment that surrounds your brain and spinal cord. That's why it's called craniosacral, your sacrum therapy. And we want to make sure that that environment, that milieu where the central and peripheral nervous system lives, that it has optimal space and environment. And when there are restrictions, when there are blows, falls, surgeries, that can actually start to block the body from doing what it knows how to do best. And fusion comes in, all kinds of things show up.
Now, you point out in the book that people get their messages in different ways. The more visual among us get internal images, while
Right.
others might get a sense of elation or dread or a
Yep.
wave of emotion that can wash through us.
Yeah.
How do you account for that?
Well, I would say that every single person is a unique individual as a human being, and each one of us has a different environment growing up. So how I receive my wisdom and how you receive yours, while they will give very similar directions to very similar issues in a lot of times, how we receive it could be different. So one person who is very artistic or visual might actually have a lot of visual imagery. Oh my God, my chest feels like a purple color. Oh, I'm being flooded with a light green. Oh, there's a lovely yellow happening behind my eyes right now. Someone else is just going to say, oh, wow, something just shifted. I'm not sure what it was, but suddenly I feel lighter. Or someone else might say, oh, someone just told me that I need to stop drinking. You know, who knows? I mean, it's really fascinating the stuff that comes up on the table and how people, they hear words, and sometimes they don't even know where the words come from. And I've had that happen to me a lot across the course of my life. They have a felt sense of something, or they see something image wise, and it's all, and then some people receive a melange of all of that at the same time. So it's a very fascinating way that the body speaks to us in ways that our left brain is not registering most of the time.
That is fascinating. And now, the subtitle of your book is Healing from Trauma and Awakening to Your Body's Wisdom. Is your book focused on any particular kind of trauma?
Actually, it's focused on all kinds of trauma. And I would say that when I started this work 30 odd years ago, I felt as though we had just this small territory that was defined as trauma. If you were a Vietnam vet, or if you had been in a terrible car accident, or if you had survived childhood abuse or rape or something very horrible, then you were a traumatized person. That was it. Nowadays, there is such an expanded understanding, very refined understanding about how trauma of all different kinds affects the human system. And that is really one of the most valuable things that neuroscience has given us in the last 10 to 15 years is that actually you can have two people in the same car accident sitting side by side, and their brains will register trauma in two different ways, and they hold on to the trauma in two entirely different ways because of their past history with trauma, because of what occurred for them in the accident, because of their sense of helplessness, their prior sense of helplessness, their sense of helplessness in the accident itself, the level of physical trauma that happened in the accident, the sense of I'm trying to remember all the different things that Dawson Church talks about. It's really fascinating how it's all starting to unfold. And I see everything from small, teeny traumas that people come in with that cause them to kind of freeze in the moment, and then huge traumas that people have been carrying around for 30, 40, 50 years. So a small trauma, for instance, I had a client, longtime client, an excellent therapist, come in a couple weeks ago. She had a wonderful stem cell procedure in her left shoulder where she thought she was going to have a whole shoulder surgery. Didn't have to have it. This stem cell procedure was really great. It was very successful. But she came in kind of hobbling and her hips were hurting. And so she got on the table and I said, I put my hands on her hips and I was listening to her body and I said, gosh, what happened during the process of the procedure? She said, well, they had to punch each hip and take out stem cells for the procedure. And it didn't hurt at the time. They numbed my hips, no big deal. I was a little uncomfortable, but no big deal. And her hips, in the meantime, I have my hands on her hips, and her hips are just screaming at me. They're like, no problem. Are you kidding me? So I had her kind of slow down and come in. We went inside, and it was as though her hips had been hanging on like a tight fist ever since each hip had one hole punched into it to extract the stem cells. And so I just held the hip until each one of them softened and opened, and they got that the procedure was over, that she wasn't going to do it again, that they were out of danger, almost like the frozenness from that moment melted. the hips relaxed and let go. Now, mind you, this procedure otherwise was completely successful. She's one happy lady, so it wasn't like there was any emotional trauma going on at the time. And yet, this part of her body froze when that invasion happened. And so within an hour, we released it. It got let go. It was really quite lovely and fun. It was a great, and she just danced on out of there and hasn't had a problem since. So there's a small trauma, right? Yeah.
You mentioned emotional trauma, and it seems to me that trauma can come as physical trauma or emotional trauma or psychological trauma, I suppose.
Absolutely.
What are the most common forms of trauma that you've dealt with, and how does trauma affect us differently if it has a physical origin or a psychological origin?
Well, no matter what its origin, whether it's psychological, emotional, physical, if it is a lasting trauma, it is going to lodge itself somewhere in the body. Okay? Somewhere in the body. You're going to see that those mean words that were said to you over and over by your older brother about what a stupid little twerp you were growing up, it's going to either end up in your shoulders and they'll be up around your ears in protection, or there'll be a feeling of betrayal in your heart because you adored your older brother, and each time he would say that to you, it would be so re-traumatizing. But no matter what kind of trauma, it almost always has, well, not almost always, it always has, it lodges somewhere in your system, mind, body, spirit, and sticks there. Now, we find that physical trauma, actual physical trauma, tends to not get released from the body if there is an emotional matrix of negative emotion at the time that the trauma went in. So if when a physical trauma happens, you're terrified, angry, grief-stricken, ashamed, feeling guilty, all of those things will lock a trauma in the body faster than almost anything else and keep it from releasing on its own, so that it actually requires outside help of some kind, either educationally or physically, like craniosacral therapy, to actually help it release from your system.
Or perhaps therapy.
Yes. Well, yes. But the problem is that most therapy doesn't touch the body. Therapists legally can't touch you physically. They can touch your heart with their words and their presence, but they can't physically touch you, which is a lot of my point in this book. When you add nurturing, non-invasive physical touch, like what you find in craniosacral therapy, it unlocks things so much faster. The sense of safety with a good, nurturing, non-invasive touch is amazing. Amazing, Paul. And that's a really powerful thing for most people to realize. You can go halfway there sometimes with a good psychotherapist or a good educational process where you understand that what happened to you wasn't your fault and didn't have anything to do really with you physically. Yes, all of that's very important. And touch, nurturing touch, particularly to the area of the bodies that are frozen. So important. And I have many, many, many stories in my book about that whole process and how it unfolds. Yeah.
Now, in craniosacral work, my understanding is you're touching the head. And no?
You might be holding the cranium. You might be holding their neck. You might be holding their heart, front and back.
Oh.
You might be holding their sacrum.
I see.
You might be holding a knee if that's where the pain is. Right. You could be holding any.
See. And what kind of, not everybody can go to you. I'm sure you're very in demand as a healer. How do people access? Does the book address where people could find resources if they want to do this kind of work?
Absolutely. And probably the gold standard is the institute that I've taught for 30 years, which is upledger.com, upledger.com, upledger.com. It's the Upledger Institute. And they've been teaching craniosacral therapy for 30-odd years, 32 years, yeah.
Now, in the book, you point out that we all have what you call an inner navigational system.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
Well, your inner navigational system is every cell of your body. So your heart's going to help you navigate certain things. Your gut is going to help you navigate other things. Your feet and legs are going to help you navigate a decision that you're having to make that you're having a hard time making. Your bones will help you navigate what's happening if things are very turbulent and emotional in your life. Your pelvis is going to help you navigate your energy flow and whether or not you have enough of it to do what it is you're trying to get done in the moment.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And you have this thing that you referred to in the book is the body intelligent quotient. I found that very interesting, the BQ. Yeah. Tell us about that.
So one of the things I realized, and I was kind of shocked by this because, well, I guess it's kind of stupid to be shocked by it, but I have been across the years. So I created this BQ, or this body intelligence quotient. It's just a very simple 9-question piece at the very beginning, questionnaire at the beginning of the book. It'll take you about 4 minutes to do it, but it tells you it'll really give you a baseline. What's your relationship with your body like, Paul? What's my relationship with my body like? How friendly am I feeling towards my body? Or do I fight with my body? Do I try to control my body? Am I out of touch with my body? Am I angry at my body? All of those things tend to come out in that BQ. So you have a baseline for where you're starting as you're beginning to read the book, because most people are unconscious, really unconscious, about what their relationship with their body actually is.
Now, in the book, you also offer 5 body-related myths. Mm-hmm. One of which is that the body is seductive and can lead us astray. Yep. Please elaborate on these myths.
Yeah. Well, there are 5 of them. What I did was I looked at the 5 ways that people most frequently get lost in terms of trying to get home to their body. So they might drop inside. The first myth is that when you drop inside, it's just too painful. I don't want to go there. The second one has to do with seductiveness. The third one has to do with the great unknown, and it'd be really dangerous to go into my body. And somebody else, you might have something about having to keep your body, keep control of everything. And then the last one, I think, is that your body's not very intelligent, and the mind really knows far more than your poor, stupid body, which actually is, nothing could be further from the truth. But all 5 of these I have seen across the last 35 years are stumbling blocks for people in coming home to their bodies. One of the core ones in our culture is that the body is seductive. And, that plays right into the myth of how our sexuality and sensuality as human beings is a liability rather than an asset to us. And nothing, again, could be further from the truth. So in each one of those, I unpack the myth. I give a story about it. I talk about how I've helped people move beyond it and what people might want to choose rather than that myth in the future in their lives.
Now, you write about the 6 wisdom areas of the body in your book, and you mentioned them a little earlier, but let's list them again. And I'm wondering if there are other areas of wisdom beyond those 6.
Absolutely. Yes, there are other areas beyond those 6. Let me just say that right off the bat. I just had to quit writing at a certain point and publish the book. So I had to, what I did was I chose the 6 that I've probably found to be the most prominent. So you have the heart. I mean, everyone understands the wisdom of the heart to some degree. Heart Math has done just such a lovely job with that in the last couple decades. Then you have the gut. People understand about gut wisdom. There's a huge amount of research right now about the gut wisdom and what we call the enteric brain, how much of our neurophysiology comes out of what's going on in our gut. And there's huge amounts of data now about that. The pelvis is the engine of the body, the root chakra. That's a huge asset to the body that most people shy away from. Our bones are a very, very clear steadying influence and area of wisdom in the body. The feet and legs are a tremendous asset for walking off or digesting, metabolizing, confusing issues in our world where we just need to get moving in order to get the issue moving and to get it to resolution for ourselves. The last wisdom area I did include was the brain, and primarily the prefrontal cortex area and that area of the brain, because that area is the area that registers what's happening in the body. And I think that most people don't realize, most people think that the brain is the boss. Here's our brain, and from the top down, our body gets told what to do. And in fact, it's really much more of a committee, that the body gives the brain a ton of signals. And there are many things in the body that can just stop the brain from being able to think clearly, function well, strategize creatively, there are any number of things that happen in the body that stop all of that from happening. And so the myth, one of the biggest and oldest myths, is the brain is the boss, and it's not. It's a very important committee member, but it's not the boss. Okay. And the integrative brain, that integrative brain is the model that I teach. So people say, oh, you don't want to be in your head. I said, no, my head is a really positive asset to who I am. And I also, in any given moment, want my heart to be open and conversing with my brain, because I know if that's the case, I think more clearly and coherently. I'm more creative. If my gut is talking with my brain and my gut is in good shape, I have much better gut hunches about what to do and how to strategize in my world. If my pelvis is connected to all of those, I have a lot more energy to do what it is I want to do. If my feet and legs are in motion and working and helping me to metabolize things, my brain integrates things better at right and left brain. So you see, all of these things are meant to work together, Paul. Right. And that's one of the things that I push a lot, is that this is a whole body process. And when you're in craniosacral land, as I call it, when you're doing craniosacral, we will often find many other wisdom areas of the body. So a woman who is contemplating, say, a hysterectomy can have a whole dialogue with her uterus and her ovaries about who the best doctor would be and what kind of surgery would be best for her at that point in time, given her choices and all of that. And those areas will speak to her, and they are wisdom areas for her in that moment in time. The same thing happens with any kind of surgery, whether you're talking prostate surgery, you're talking lung cancer surgery, whether you're talking optical surgery, whatever it is, the body has wisdom that it wants to share with you. And you can have better outcomes in your surgeries by having conversations with the body parts that you're going to have surgery on. It's very, very helpful. And there may be other healing that can go on around that.
You know, you mentioned earlier one of these 6 wisdom areas, the pelvis. In most cultures around the world today, the pelvis is like the black sheep of the body. What are the ramifications of that?
Well, the ramifications are that it goes into our shadow. And when something goes into the shadow, when we're not conscious of it, it's just bad. Don't do it. Don't feel that delicious feeling you have whenever you see your best friend's wife or husband, or, you're not really having that feeling, or be a good straight arrow, or whatever it is you're receiving. I'm sorry, but that's a problem. That's a problem. And I'll throw a big one out there for you. I think it's one of the major problems in the Catholic Church right now, because the priests and the nuns don't get to have mates in life. They're supposed to mate with Jesus Christ, who doesn't have a body. He's a spirit.
Right.
So he's God. So, excuse me, but now you have a whole population of people who are in power who don't get to have that part of themselves. And so it comes out in very shadowy ways that aren't pretty, that aren't good.
I like the way that you point out that our sensuality and sexuality need to be allowed rather than locked out. That's such an important point. Why is curiosity such an important attribute to cultivate?
Well, because in order to embody more deeply, in order to have this core embodiment of all these wisdom areas, you have to have a direct experience of what's happening in your body, right? You've got to be able to feel it without judging it. And curiosity is the antidote to judgment. Curiosity is, there's a tight place in my gut right now. I wonder what that's trying to tell me. As opposed to, oh my God, my gut is tight. I wonder if my ulcer is acting up. Oh my God, I better call my doctor right away. Oh, if my ulcer's acting up, they told me that I might end up with stomach cancer. Oh, what? So do you see what happens when you start to judge something rather than being curious about it? You've just now lost whatever that tightness in your gut was trying to tell you in that moment. So curiosity is the doorway in. It's the attribute that helps you get into your core embodiment.
Right, that's what you say. You have this curiosity, awareness, trust method, the CAT method, that helps stimulate the core embodiment process.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of time, but let's say a few words about the core embodiment process.
So the core embodiment means what it feels like to be you on the inside. Like, who do you feel like when you drop inside your body, when you feel your belly, when you feel your heart, when you can feel your bones and your legs, you can feel what it feels like to be you today in this moment, Paul. That's your core embodiment. And I have many, many tools in the book and in my trainings that actually teach people how to have deeper and deeper core embodiment so that they can live in the present moment more authentically all the time. To me, my core embodiment is something I'm growing all the time. And it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's really lovely. Yeah.
That is beautiful. We're just about to close the show. Is there any words of advice you'd like to offer the audience?
Well, I would just like to say that this process of being inside and really learning how to have your core embodiment, not just to know the concept, but to really have it, is what will guide us into being more wise individuals and to being able to ascertain what is right for us and what is not, and to think critically in this crazy, turbulent world, in the crazy, turbulent times we live in right now. This core embodiment is vital. And I really hope that people can take the time. There's a free audio that comes with the book that helps people get to their core embodiment in many, many different levels, the core embodiment and then all the different embodiments and all the different wisdom areas. And so that's available to people. And I really would love to share that with the world. That's my creative drive.
Well, let's be sure to tell our listeners about your website. What's the best website for them to go to find more information about your book, your work in general?
That would be healingfromthecore.com, C-O-R-E, healingfromthecore.com.
All one word, healingfromthecore.com.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Suzanne, for being on the show today. There's so much more we could explore, but we have run out of time.
Thank you, Paul. This has been a pleasure.
And for those who tuned in late, this is your Pathways host, Paul O'Brien, author of Great Decisions, Perfect Timing, a book that shares the theme of Pathways, which is personal and cultural evolution. In a second, I'll tell you how you can rewind and replay this interview anytime you like, via the internet or as a free podcast. Just search for Pathways or Paul O'Brien and you will find it. Today we have been visiting with Suzanne Scurlock-Durana, author of Reclaiming Your Body, Healing from Trauma and Awakening to Your Body's Wisdom. Such a beautiful and timely book. I want to say thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to the Pathways program, which is broadcast and streamed worldwide via KBOO.FM Sunday mornings at 8:30 a.m. USA Pacific Time. Podcasts of today's show, which you can listen to and forward to others, are available for free at divination.com, spelled D-I-V-I nation.com, as well as via iTunes and other free podcast servers. This is Paul O'Brien reminding you to tell your friends about Pathways Radio and Podcast. And thanks again to Suzanne Scurlock-Durana and to all of you listeners for tuning in and being a part of the Pathways experience.